History has a habit of celebrating public moments, coronations, victories, the rise of kings, the fall of kingdoms. But every now and then, history falls strangely silent. In the year 1173, it happened to one of the most powerful women in Europe. Her name was Eleanor of Aquitaine. One day, she disappeared behind the walls of a prison. Not for a week, not for a month, for 16 years. Think about that. 16 birthdays, 16 winters, 16 summers. While the world outside kept moving, history had almost nothing to say. No famous speeches, no political triumphs, no great victories, just silence. And perhaps that isn't history's fault, because history is very good at recording what people accomplish, but it has never been very good at recording what suffering accomplishes. What happens to a human soul when nobody is watching? When the applause disappears, when the doors close, when there is nothing left to protect except the person you are becoming. History never really answers that question. But Scripture does, not through a queen, through a woman history almost remembers for the wrong reason. A woman whose name became attached to a rooftop, even though the most important part of her story happened long after everyone stopped looking. Her name was Bathsheba. Jerusalem, spring. Israel was at war. Among David's soldiers was a man named Uriah. Back in Jerusalem, someone waited for him. Her name was Bathsheba. No speeches, no miracles, no remarkable introduction. Just an ordinary woman living what she thought would be an ordinary life. Then, without warning, everything changes. It was the season when kings went to war. David stayed behind. One evening, he walked across the roof of his palace, and he saw her. Scripture never asks us to examine the woman on the roof. It asks us to watch the king. David had power. Bathsheba did not. David sent messengers. Bathsheba came. Whatever happened that evening, it wasn't two equals writing the same story. It was one decision made by one man that would alter many lives. Weeks later, a message reached the palace. 4 words, "I am pregnant." And with those 4 words, an ordinary life became a tragedy. From that moment, the king stopped thinking like a shepherd and started thinking like a man with something to lose. He tried to hide the truth. When that failed, he chose a darker path. A letter was written. A faithful soldier carried it. A faithful soldier never came home. Bathsheba buried her husband. The Bible doesn't tell us what she said. It doesn't tell us how she survived those days. It simply tells us she mourned. When the mourning was over, David brought her into the palace. From the outside, it almost looked like mercy, but appearances have never impressed God. Scripture closes the chapter with one sentence. The thing David had done displeased the Lord. For everyone else, the case was closed. For God, it had only just begun. Then God broke the silence. Not with fire, not with an army, with a man, Nathan. He walked into the palace carrying nothing except a story. A rich man, a poor man, one little lamb. David listened. His anger rose. The man who did this deserves to die. Nathan looked at the king. Men spoke 4 words that have echoed through history. You are the man. The palace must have fallen silent. The king, who believed he was judging another man, had unknowingly judged himself. Then Nathan spoke again. This time, the words reached far beyond David. The child will die. Imagine hearing those words if you were Bathsheba. She had already buried her husband. Now she sat beside a child whose future had already been spoken. Days passed. Hope faded. Then the child died. The Bible doesn't tell us what Bathsheba said. It doesn't tell us if she cried out to God. It doesn't record a prayer or a lament, only silence. And perhaps that's because some griefs cannot be described, only carried. And something extraordinary happens. Scripture almost lets her disappear. David's story continues. Battles are fought. Kings rise. The kingdom moves forward. Bathsheba almost vanishes from the pages. Almost. Because what looks like the end of a story is sometimes only the beginning of a transformation. History often mistakes silence for emptiness. God never does. Suffering changes people. That much is inevitable. The question is, what? Scripture gives us more than one answer. John the Baptist confronted Herodias. He exposed a truth she did not want to hear. She could have humbled herself. Instead, she waited. Until one banquet, one careless promise, one terrible request, a prophet's head on a platter. Correction became revenge. Jezebel stood beneath the fire of Mount Carmel. She watched the power of God with her own eyes. She could have surrendered. Instead, she sent a message. By this time tomorrow, you will be dead. One sentence, one threat, and the prophet who had stood before hundreds ran into the wilderness. Correction became intimidation. 2 women, 2 wounds, 2 closed doors. Then there was Bathsheba. Nathan had walked into her life carrying words no mother should ever hear. The child will die. And the child did die. If anyone had reason to close the door, it was Bathsheba. Years passed. Another crisis came. David was dying. The kingdom trembled. Nathan needed someone he could trust. He didn't go to the generals. He didn't go to the priests. He didn't go to the commanders of the army. He went to Bathsheba. Why? Because people rarely return to doors they expect to find locked. Nathan returned because the door was still open. David was dying. The kingdom could feel it. And whenever a throne begins to empty, someone reaches for it. Adonijah moved first. He gathered supporters, prepared a feast, and behaved as though the crown already belonged to him. Only one problem remained. David had made a different promise. When news reached Nathan, he didn't ride to the army. He didn't gather the priests. He didn't confront Adonijah. He walked to Bathsheba. Think about that. Years earlier, Nathan had walked into her life carrying judgment. Now, he returned carrying hope, not because the past had been forgotten, but because trust had survived it. Together, they went to the king. Bathsheba spoke first. No bitterness, no accusation, just a quiet reminder. My lord, you swore that Solomon would reign after you. Then Nathan entered, just as they had planned. 2 voices, 1 promise, 1 future. David answered without hesitation. Solomon your son shall reign after me. Before the sun set, the trumpet sounded, oil was poured. The people rejoiced, and Solomon became king. Not because Bathsheba's story had been easy, not because she had lived without sorrow, but because the years history never recorded had prepared her for the moment history never forgot. Almost 1,000 years passed. Kings came, kingdoms fell, empires rose and disappeared. Then, another man sat down to tell the greatest story ever written. His name was Matthew. He didn't begin with the birth of Jesus. He didn't begin with angels, or shepherds, or wise men. He began with a list of names. Most people never read it. Page after page, generation after generation. Then, something strange happens. Matthew reaches David, and instead of writing, David was the father of Solomon by Bathsheba, he writes, David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah, not Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah. Why? Why reopen an old wound? Why remind us of the rooftop? Why mention the husband who never came home? Surely, this is the moment to let the past stay buried. But Matthew won't let us. Because God never tells stories by pretending the painful chapters never happened. He doesn't erase them, he redeems them. The woman history remembered for a scandal, God remembered as part of the story that would lead to Christ. Perhaps that is the strange sense of humor. Not that God laughs at suffering, but that he so often takes the chapter we would spend our lives trying to hide and places it at the very center of his redemption. We began with a woman behind a locked door, Eleanor of Aquitaine, 16 years. History records the prison. Then almost nothing, until one day the door opened. Eleanor stepped back into the world, not defeated, not forgotten. The years history could not explain became the years that prepared her for everything that followed. Perhaps history was asking the wrong question all along. Not, what happened while she was imprisoned? But, who was she becoming? Bathsheba answered the same question. History remembered the rooftop. God remembered the woman who walked through the silent years without letting them define her. One disappeared behind stone walls. The other disappeared behind silence. Neither disappeared from God's sight. And perhaps that is the strangest thing about grace. It does not begin when the painful chapter is over. It begins right in the middle of it. So if today you find yourself living through one of those years history will never record, the years no one applauds, the years no one understands, the years that feel forgotten, don't mistake silence for absence. Because while history records what the world can see, God is doing his deepest work where no one else is looking. History remembers what happened to us. God remembers who we became. Bring him the wound, keep the door open, and trust him with the silent years. The Constant North. Subscribe, follow, and share for more.